My name's John Turner. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting, and I'm assisted by my colleague, Kate Sheldon, who is the host of the meeting. Just a couple of points. The meeting is a public meeting, and in line with the relevant regulations, it will be live streamed for the public to view. Can members and participants be reminded to keep themselves on mute when they are not speaking? If they simply raise their hand, the chair will ask you to speak, and if you can put yourself back on mute after that. One final point from me, for members of the public and the applicant, you may see members looking to their left or right. They are simply looking at other devices and they're not being distracted. I'll now hand you over to the chair of the meeting, Councillor Karen McGowan.
Thank you, John. So my name's Councillor Karen McGowan and I'm chairing today's meeting. So now I'm going to ask members to introduce themselves. Joe?
Councillor Joe Otten. Hi.
Cliff?
Councillor Cliff Woodcraft.
Thank you. Claire?
Hi, I'm Claire from the Licensing Service.
Thank you. Mary Claire?
Hi, Mary Claire Frankie, Solicitor to the Subcommittee.
Thank you. Elaine?
Hello, I'm Elaine Cresswell. I'm from Environmental Health.
Hi, have we got Mr. Summernight here? Can you bring him into the meeting, please? Will Mr. Summernight have heard all our introductions? I don't think he will have.
Probably not, no. We've done this before. We should have waited, shouldn't we?
Yeah. I've just realised that he wasn't here.
Yeah, I should have pointed that out, Chair, sorry.
I know it's my fault as well. Mr. Summernight, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Yeah, you've not got your camera on. I don't know if you're able to do that.
I can try. If do you really want to see my ugly mug?
Yeah, it would help. Yeah.
Hang on a second. Hang on.
If you're having problems, are you?
Yeah, I just can't find anywhere which says similar.
Right. Usually it says video at the side of the mute button on the bottom. I don't know if it does the same for you. It says stop video or start video.
Hang on, at the side of my name.
Down in the bottom on my screen, it's in the bottom left-hand corner where the mute button is. I don't know if different devices are different.
All I've got.
He's muted himself now.
Yeah, sorry, you're on mute at the moment.
Mr. Summernight, what device are you using?
You're on mute, so we can't hear you. That's it.
Right, I can unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I can hear you.
Right.
How do I get to the screen then?
Kate was just asking you what device you're on.
An iPhone.
An iPhone. Kate, have you got any ideas of?
An iPhone, it's the top right-hand side.
Okay.
Top of your screen on the right-hand side.
On the next screen, nothing. On the next screen, I can see 3 pictures of Joe Otten, Councillor Cliff Woodcraft and Elaine. The next screen, Karen McGowan, John Turner, Marie Claire Frankie.
Right.
Yeah, that's us, Mark. We just want to see you if we can, if possible. It's not the end of the world, but it would help.
Okay. Got no buttons.
Okay, I mean, if you're happy to go ahead without us being able to see you, then that, you know, if you're happy with that.
Well, I'm trying to find different buttons. Copy streaming link. I've got nothing.
Right.
Let me disconnect and try and reconnect.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Hello.
Got him.
That's helpful.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you and I can see you. You are sideways, but we can see you.
Right. Okay.
That's
Hang on a
great. Thank
second.
you. That's it.
Oh,
No, that's it.
Hang on a second.
That's great.
Right. Okay. I'll have to hold on to that then.
Okay, we'll start again then. That's fine. So, John, do you want to start again?
yeah. Sorry, Mr. Simonite. We as soon as it goes live, we go into a mode where we have to get going, and we forgot to do the introductions to your good self. So I'm John Turner. I'm from Democratic Services, and I'm assisted, by my colleague Kate Sheldon, who's hosting the meeting.
Okay.
Just very quickly, it is being live streamed, so there may be members of the public listening in or watching in. I'm not sure if they can actually see it. And if you wish to speak, Mr. Simonite, just simply raise your hand, and the chair will ask you to speak. We do ask you to keep on mute throughout the hearing. It helps the meeting run smoothly. So obviously, keep on muting yourself when you want to speak. And one other final thing is you may see members looking to the right and left of their screens. They're not being distracted in any ways. They've got papers up on other screens. So, okay, that's it from me. I'll hand you over to the chair.
Okay.
Right, thanks, John. So I'm Councillor Karen McGowan, and I'm chair of this meeting. So Joe, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Councillor Joe Watson, member of the subcommittee.
Thank you. Cliff?
Hello, I'm Councillor Cliff Woodcraft, also a member of the subcommittee.
Thanks. Marie Claire?
Hi, Mary Claire Frankie, solicitor to the subcommittee.
Thank you. And Claire?
Hi, I'm Claire Bauer. I'll be presenting the report on behalf of licensing today.
Thank you. And Elaine? Sorry, Elaine, you're on mute.
I'm the environmental health technician from environmental regulation. I look at health and safety.
Thank you very much. And do you want to just introduce yourself, Mark?
Yeah. I'm Mark. I'm the licensee or founder of the Dead Parrot Brewing Company and the guy what's applying for a license.
Thank you very much. So over to you, Marie Claire, to talk through the procedure for today, please.
Hi, it's a real straightforward procedure. So Claire from licensing is here to outline the report. If there's anything that's factually incorrect, if you raise it and we can address it at that point. If that's all fine, then it'll be over to Elaine to outline the issues that she's raised from the Health Protection Service point of view. Members can ask questions, and with the leave of the chair, you can ask any questions if you want. It'll then be over to yourself to respond to the issues that Elaine has raised and to outline your application. Again, members can ask questions, and with the leave of the chair, officers can ask you some questions as well. It'll then be over to Health Protection Service to sum up. Finally, you get a chance to sum up, and the licensing officer will detail the options that the committee have available to them. Now, at that point, yourself, Health Protection Service and licensing will leave this virtual meeting just leaving myself, Democratic Services and the members in place where the members will take legal advice and come to their decision. You'll be informed of the decision in writing later on today, just in short, and then a full note will come later in the week. It's a public meeting. We are being live streamed, so there's nobody to come in or out. And that's it, I think, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, Mark?
Yeah, so just to clarify then, the point of this meeting is just to decide on the toilet provision, because I believe we've answered every other question or proposal. Is
Yeah,
that
that's
correct?
right. Yeah, so your application was sent in or was made in the usual way, circulated to the responsible authorities, and the outstanding issue that can't be, well, hasn't been able to be remedied by the pair of you or by the service and yourself is the issue relating to toilets. So
Okay,
you intend to raise your issue to members, and then members decide on that issue.
So just to clarify then, so the last email I received indicated that the capacity, according to the fire officer, was 50, whereas I've already responded to that previously, and the fire officer has agreed it should be 160 for the building plus 200 for outside. Are we on the same page?
I personally haven't seen that detail. That's what Elaine will give us throughout this process, and you'll be able to come back with what information you've got, and then we'll try and resolve it.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Is that something that's worth clarifying from Elaine? If you can outline that, if you have that, or is that something that you have information of?
I have got a series of emails and communications with Mark. The last thing I've asked him to do was to come to a decision about his capacity. And that's what really we're going to talk about as part of this process.
And have you had the information from the fire service that Mark's?
I've had information from the fire service, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm now going to go to Claire for her to give us the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report this afternoon is to consider an application for the grant of a premises licence for 44 Garden Street, Sheffield, S14BJ, that's been made under the Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003. The applicant is Mr. Mark Simonite, and the application, which was received on the 18th of June, is attached at page 13 of the report. The application has been referred to you because there has been an unresolved representation from the Health Protection Service. The representation is detailed at page 42 of the report, and an email with further detail was circulated on Friday, the 9th of October. During the consultation period, the applicant has agreed to 4 conditions with the Environmental Protection Service, and these are detailed at page 44 of the report. Both the applicant and the officer from the Health Protection Service are attending this meeting today. The case was initially booked in for the hearing at the end of August, but an extension was granted to allow additional time for the Health Protection Service to resolve the objection. There have been attempts to resolve the matter, but there hasn't been a final agreement from the applicant. There are no specific financial implications arising from the application. However, additional costs may be incurred should the matter go to appeal. Appeals can be made by the applicant and those making representations. And the recommendation this afternoon is that members carefully consider the representations made and take such steps as the subcommittee consider appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Is everybody happy with the report we've just heard as a true record? Yes, Joe?
Thank you. I mean, I did have a question on the report, but it may have been answered already. I mean, there's an objection. We refer to an objection, which is in Appendix B, and that just says there is an objection. I came to this meeting not knowing what the objection was. And I think it would be helpful, I suppose, if it was said in the papers what the grounds of the objection are. Now, obviously, I've heard from Mr. Simonite that it's about the toilets, and I kind of guessed that because we've had other papers relating to standards for toilets in these establishments. So I kind of guessed, but it would have been helpful, I think, unless I missed it, this to be, the issue to be kind of put in the papers in the appendix where the objection is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Simonite?
Yeah, you refer to a document and you indicated page 44. Where do I find this document?
Was a link sent to you with the invite for this hearing? It should have also sent a link to the paper report of the hearing today. So
Okay, no, I've not received. I've not. And who would that have come from?
Kate, would that have come from you?
No, I just send the link for the report, link to the meeting.
The only thing I've received is a link to a meeting. I've not had any report.
I only send the link to the meeting. I don't send anything else out.
John, do you know who sends the link to the report?
I thought that was you good selves, Claire. Sorry,
Okay.
we certainly don't. Not to the applicants.
Right.
No.
Mr. Simonite, can I apologise? I've come into this meeting very late. I didn't prepare the report or the invites to the hearing. So if you've not received that, can I apologise? I can send a copy of it to you now if you can give me, I suppose you don't want to tell me your email address on the live stream.
Just on, Elaine, do you want to come in? You're on mute.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just to mention that the 4 conditions that I think are all referred to are to do with noise. It's not the sort of the matters that I were talking to Mr. Simonite about. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So the papers that are in the report, Mr. Simonite, are your application, the initial email from Elaine making the initial objection to your application, and then the document that I'm referring to at page 44 is the agreed conditions that you've made with, I think it was John Round from the Environmental Protection Service. So that's just for information to members, to let them know that you've already agreed some conditions on your licence.
Okay, I mean, I generally know what's happening, but I've not received any documents, so I can't read it. I'm happy to carry on to a point, but I've not had this information.
No, I understand.
So I'm happy to carry on, but I might be working blind.
Right. We've got 2 options. We can either postpone and let you have the documentation, or like you say, we can carry on if you want to resolve.
No, carry on, and if it becomes difficult, then
okay,
we'll look to resolve it.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thanks for your cooperation, and again, apologies as well that you didn't receive the paperwork. So everyone's happy with the report that Claire has just said, except for Mr. Simonite hasn't seen it. So now I'm going to move on to Elaine and ask you to make your presentation then, Elaine, please.
Hello, thank you. Sorry, could I just mention there's something very rattly when Mr. Simonite's link is on. It makes it difficult to hear.
Right, okay.
If it
might want to, that's it, might have done it.
Thank you. When we're looking at a licence application, in our team, we look at matters of public safety and if there's any risk to public safety. So we're looking at the use of the building. Obviously in Sheffield, there's quite a lot of changes to buildings all the time. And what an original design was suitable for might not be suitable for the new design. Sorts of things, floor surfaces, stairs, balustrades, sanitary accommodation, and things like facilities for the disabled we look at. Now, Simonite's application is quite complicated because it's got lots of different activities going on the site. I don't know if, can I hold something up to show you? I don't know if that would help.
Yeah, if we can see, yeah.
If you can see it.
Oh, Yeah, we've got diagrams. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you've got
the
your
report.
So there's sort of three different elements to this plan. We've got the upstairs of the premises, which is quite straightforward, and there's planning permission for it to be used as a place of entertainment purposes, so things like cinema, concert hall, that kind of thing, so multi-purpose space. The downstairs has got A4 use as a drinking establishment, so as a bar. And then Mr. Simonite wants to license the whole of the yard area as well, for use as, I've got it written down somewhere, so as an event space. So it's quite complicated from a health and safety point of view. Now with this particular application, because there's only one way in to the site and one way out of the site, so which comes off the street here. So I spoke to the fire officer to see if there would be any implications about having events in this yard, because you've only got one way in and one way out. There's a maximum number of people that you could safely have in the yard area as a whole. And the fire officer came back with a number of 200 potentially in the yard. Similarly with the building, all the fire escape routes discharge into the yard or into the alleyway. So the fire officer was able to give me some advice as to the maximum number of people that could be evacuated safely, because I needed to have some idea of how many people could be using this site when looking at things like toilets, you know, and how many toilets would be needed for the kinds of things going on there. So the total figure that the fire officer came up with was a maximum of 60 for the top floor, a maximum of 100, I believe, in the drinking establishment, and a maximum of 200 for the yard. And the yard itself, what Mr. Simonite wants was to license it for all the activities listed, which is there's quite a lot of different activities listed in the application. Things like plays, films, music, recording music, dance, late night refreshment and alcohol as well. To use it as a garden and as an event space. So there's all sorts of things going on there with potentially quite a lot of people on site. Now, looking at the sort of some of the issues that we looked at was risk of, because you've got a brewery as well, that was the other thing, in the corner of the site here, there's a microbrewery. So you've obviously got commercial activity, people coming and going in relation to that, and potentially deliveries. So one of the things I spoke to Mr. Simonite about was to consider minimising the risk to customers from moving vehicles and barrels associated with brewery activity. And Mr. Simonite was quite kindly agreed to put a partial barrier at the entrance there, just to make it clear to people who may be coming into the site that there is something, you shouldn't be reversing vehicles in, because the entrance of the building is right in this undercroft in the corner there. Might be see it better on this diagram if you've got this one. So it's a blind corner basically. So that's good that we've got some kinds of means of restricting entry to the site. And one of the things I would like to be considered as a condition on the licence is that the movement of vehicles and barrels during bar opening hours are to be risk assessed and customers separated from any moving and lifting activities. That's obviously because you've got to be careful where vehicles and customers cross over. So that's a condition to consider. Now, as the building in sort of the building works going on, has involved changes to to the site, changes to the toilets, changes to the escape routes, we normally look for another condition, which is a building control completion certificate. Partly the reason for that is because under the, when building works are being done, it's done to a certain standard that meets Part M of the building regulations. And that is to do with buildings being constructed in a safe, that the parts of the building are done in a safe way, that there's no harm from the building. So that, because of the alterations, that was another condition that we'd like to look at, but we haven't come to an agreement on that one. Now perhaps moving on then to the toilet provision, the capacity of the building is not just about the numbers of toilets, it's to do with the maximum number that you should have for fire safety, the available floor area after fixed seating, standing at the bar, access routes and circulation routes are taken into account, so it's going to be less than the maximum number that the fire safety officer would perhaps consider as reasonable. And we also have to consider the number of toilets available. So what we're trying to determine, hopefully today, is what that capacity should be. Now, because it's quite a complicated site, it perhaps, obviously, all of these activities wouldn't be happening at the same time. So I'm not looking for toilets for potentially 360 people, but I would be looking to see that there was at least sufficient for the capacity of the building, because you may be having people upstairs, people downstairs, and if the weather's fine, they're probably all outside rather than inside. So for fire safety purposes, that number is 160 people. Whether that is quite that 100 people in the bar would fit once you've actually got all your furniture and you've worked out your available floor space, is perhaps not quite so clear at the moment. But if we were looking for a capacity of 160, which I think is what Mark's looking for, then the numbers of toilets need to be higher than the numbers that he's got at the moment. And I had discussions about this right from email number 1, going back to July, and we've had various discussions about that. At the moment on the plan, we've got 2 female toilets, 1 unisex disabled, 1 male WC and 2 urinals. Now, when we're looking at the numbers of toilets in buildings, we use a standard called BS 6465. And to make it a bit easier for everybody, I've circulated some guidance on the toilets, because when you read what it says, it doesn't make a lot of sense until you actually sit down and work out exactly what the numbers should be. So, for example, the standard talks about 2 toilets for up to 25 females plus 1 for every additional 25, and 2 toilets for up to 150 males plus an additional 1 for every 200. And there's different combinations of that. So I put together a little table to make it a bit clearer. So for a capacity of 160, you would be looking at 5 female toilets, 2 male toilets and 2 urinals. And this is something that I did advise Mr. Simmerlight quite early on in July. Now, clearly we've only got 2 female toilets, so there's quite a bit of difference there, because when we're looking at toilets and capacity, you kind of assume that there's equal numbers of males and females. So that's where those numbers come from. If you don't have enough toilets, then you've got problems with queuing. And in terms of things about building safety, it's not quite so clear on this one, but I'll do it highlight this a bit more. In the ground floor plan, if you have a look at your plan, the toilets are all sort of in the far side of the building over here. It's only quite a small area in the lobby area, so if there's going to be any queuing, it's probably going to spill out into the bar area. Anyone in a wheelchair would have to try and get into that corner space there. Now, the thing about alcohol, when people are in drink, alcohol's diuretic, people go to the toilet more frequently, and that's why there's a higher standard for toilets in bars. And also, if people are queuing, people can get a bit restless and a bit irritable, and you can get problems with a sort of behaviour, potentially even fighting. So the idea is to try not to have queues too long or too large. So in terms of the building, I would prefer to see more toilets, at least 3 more female toilets. At the moment, you've only got 1 male toilet. So in order to meet the minimum standard, we normally consider that the disabled toilet can count towards either a male toilet or a female toilet, but not both. So in this case, as the minimum is 2, it would probably count towards the male toilet. So in terms of the building, my feeling is that there's not quite enough toilets there for the 160. Looking on the table that I've done, it's closer to 50 for the minimum number of toilets that are provided. And that really just covers the activities in the building itself. In terms of the use of the yard as a community space, or Mr. Simon was talking about having beer festivals on a quite regular basis throughout the summer, there would be need for more toilets, obviously than the ones that you've got in there anyway, and I accept that that could be addressed by portable toilets. But again, we haven't really got any information about what those activities are in the yard. So consideration there might be for some form of risk assessment for events that are actually happening in the yard if numbers exceed the capacity of the building. The other issue, which is my final one, is that this plan isn't the most up-to-date plan. At the entrance, it shows a ramp going into the bar area. There is in fact a step there. And when we have plans, in our team, we use a sort of a kind of code of practice for premises that we circulate to people who've applied for a licence. And we do ask that things like beer gardens are marked on the plan, really so that you can check that means of escape is suitable, that you're not, you've not got overcrowding outside as well. But we don't have anything indicated on the plan as to where the beer garden is or what the other activities are. So ideally, it would be good to have the up-to-date plan which shows the step at the front entrance, and some detail on the plan as to which bits actually is going to be the beer garden. And I think that's me.
Thank you very much. So it's over to councillors now. Have you got any questions for Elaine on what you've just heard? Yes, Claire?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, if the yard was occupied to the level that the fire safety officer agreed, what would be the number of toilets you'd need for the whole site then?
Sorry, Elaine, you're on mute. We can't hear.
Sorry. Are we looking at if there was 360 people on?
Yeah.
You would really be looking at 9 female toilets, 3 male toilets and 4 urinals.
Okay, thank you. That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Joe, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm not clear. I mean, we've been talking about the toilets, but before we came to the toilets, you were making points about access and vehicles and moving barrels and so on, and talking about conditions associated with that. Are those conditions in the papers anywhere? Have they been? I mean, are they in dispute as well, or is it just the toilets that are in dispute?
Sorry, Elaine, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Hang on a second.
We have talked about conditions, and they were in various email correspondence with Mark, and he did agree in principle. But when I contacted him I've sort of asked, well, can we kind of clarify, because there's sort of, with the toilets, one option would be to stick with the toilets you've got and have a smaller number of people on site. The other option would be to, and then at the future, put in a variation when you've got more toilets. And one of the, and that was one of the things I did suggest. And as well as trying to confirm the capacity, I have asked about having things located, shown on the plan, and I have asked about these conditions. So it was the one on the movements of vehicles, a risk assessment for events in the yard exceeding the agreed capacity of the premise of the building, a building control completion certificate. And I think Mark's was kind of agreeable in principle, but didn't want to confirm them until we'd had this meeting. I'm just concerned that we've got an option. Obviously, one of the options open to us as a committee is to grant with conditions, and if those conditions aren't clear as to what conditions we should impose, and they're not in the documents, then I'm slightly concerned as to how we might go about doing that. Is that for me to answer?
Well, if you can,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can only apologise. I sent the email trail which had got information about sort of all the correspondence and the conditions and everything to, I think it was Jane, to licensing in August, I think, and copied in everything in the 22nd of September when I corresponded with Jane. I haven't done one of these hearings before. My colleague that usually deals with the licensing isn't available. He's not at work and won't be for a while yet. So I've just done the best I can do. So I can only apologise if there's something I haven't done that you should have done.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm happy to move on from this now, and we'll come to it if it, see if we can resolve it if we have to.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Elaine, can I just ask one question? Just so I understand the plans, there's like a first floor and a ground floor, and all the toilets that are being proposed on the ground floor, there's nothing on the top floor. And so the people from up on the top would come downstairs to use the toilets, just so I'm clear. Right, okay. Thank you very much. Okay then, so any more questions? Have you got anything, Marie-Claire? No? Okay then. So Mark, are you still with us? Because you've disappeared off screen. Just want to check that you can hear.
Yeah, I can hear.
Right, thanks. So it's over to you now for you to tell us what's happening from your side and to comment on what Elaine has said.
Okay. Right, in terms of the what Elaine was saying earlier regarding building regulations, etc., and Part M of a building certificate, I've spoken to building control, and also I got advice from, is it NBC, which is a private company which does building control on behalf of lots of councils. And the level of work we're doing is basically removing a false ceiling, removing some plasterboard partition walls, and decorating. So in terms of building control, there's not a lot of involvement from them. Same with the toilets. We're using an existing toilet area and removing partition walls and converting. In terms of movement of barrels, we've responded to that already, and we will make sure that when we move them and vehicles, it's risk assessed. We will use banksmen, etc., and that's already been agreed. Same with fire regs with the fire officer. And then Elaine's talked about outside events, cinema, plays, etc. When we put a license application in, we are given a series of boxes to tick. Unless we tick these boxes which indicate what potential activity we will do in the future, we have to keep reapplying for a change of the license, which costs you X amount of pounds. We have to then put the application into the local media, and a couple of £1,000s down the line, our license is enhanced to enable us to do certain activities. Being a Yorkshireman, I don't want to be spending that kind of money every time I want to facilitate an event. So if someone says to me, could you allow us to do a cinema evening, use some classic cinema, I want to say yes. If someone wants to put a play on, I want to say yes. Because we've got a space that we can use for as a community space, and we want to be able to license activities in there. So we apply for everything at once. So we're not saying we are going to do these activities week in, week out, day in, day out. What we don't want to do is be applying and spending money unnecessarily going forward. But I think we have agreed the majority of what has been sort of suggested, talked about, etc. The only issue I have is we agree something in principle, and then I get a follow-up email, obviously, which is dated and timed after the conversation we've had, and it kind of backtracks to something we talked about previous to an agreement. For instance, the last email I received from Elaine indicates that my capacity, according to the fire officer, is 50. Now, having spoken to the fire officer, and without him visiting the building due to COVID, because of width of fire exits, upstairs and downstairs and the yard, and removing fire exits just in case one was out of action or not needed, he has said 160 for the building and 200 outside, which I am more than happy with. We can always visit this in the future and have it amended. You know, when the fire officer visits the building and sees that all our electrical work is being confined within a metal structure, so that in the event of a fire, cables cannot hang down and impede fire officers, you know, that's seen as a plus for us. So he might decide to increase our fire capacity based on that. But fire capacity is not an issue if it is what the fire officer said on his correspondence and not what my last email said on Elaine's correspondence. But I think we're about there on everything apart from toilets. Now, toilets is where I fundamentally disagree with Elaine's findings. In the building, and we're going to discount the brewery, and we're going to discount the toilets that are already available in the brewery in case I have an event which involves a brewery tour. I've worked in this industry since I was 15 years old. I've been a licensee since 1997. I've been on brewery trips and events, worked in pubs and bars all over the world. Now, to give me a capacity of 50 people where I have got 4 WCs is not representative of what a British standard is. Now, having read the British standard, or having a copy of the British standard, because this is the standard that Elaine has decided we are going to use. Now, looking at Sheffield City Council's website, there is absolutely nothing in the Sheffield City Council website which refers to toilets. No information whatsoever. No information regarding public toilets. You look on government websites and there is absolutely no information at all. It is not legislated for. So with Elaine pushing for British Standard is just a code of practice, and it specifically says in the British Standard, it is a form of guidance and recommendation. It's not set in stone. It is just guidance. It also stipulates within British Standard, unless other data is made available. So in the first instance, I'd like to request the data for every licensed premises in Sheffield where alcohol is consumed on the premises. Could you please provide me with the data which tells me what their toilet provision is and capacity? And I think you'll find there isn't one for the majority of public houses. So looking at what we can't get and what we can get, you're kind of working blind. So I've had to look on the internet, being the font of all knowledge, using my experience and dealing with previous licensing. And the general rule of thumb for toilets on licensed premises is for a WC, which is the sit-down type toilet, not a urinal, is 25 people for every sit-down WC in the ladies. And then you double it to give you capacity. So for example, if you have 3 sit-down WCs for ladies or available for ladies, that gives you a capacity of 25. 3 times 25 is 75, and you double it to 150. If you look at North Norfolk District Council, North Norfolk District Council use almost this exact philosophy, as do Derbyshire Dales District Council. Now, just about every district council in the country stipulates if you have 1 female WC and 1 male WC, that gives you a capacity of 50. Now, which indicates 25 females, 25 males. Now, if you extrapolate that and you say, well, what if you had 4 WCs? Surely 2 WCs, 1 male, 1 female is 50. So therefore 4 would be 100. So if I can take 2 of my 4 WCs and say, these are for downstairs and these are for upstairs, that gives me a capacity of 100 people. 2 toilets for upstairs and 2 toilets for downstairs. Now, according to British standards, you are allowed to have toilets on different floors if they are within 1 floor of the licensed area. You know, it's kind of common knowledge. You go into Wetherspoons, you've got to walk to the toilet because they're normally always on different floors, because your sales floor is normally, you know, a highly regarded area in terms of customer use and customer spend. So they put the toilets somewhere else. So with all this in mind, I expect as a minimal, if I have got 1 sit-down WC for ladies and 1 sit-down WC for gents, I would have 50 people. So if I can double that and have 2 sit downs for ladies and 2 sit downs for gents, I would have 150 people. But then if you look further into the British Standard, you have urinals come into play. Now, with urinals, the British Standard states that, turning my pages, that a WC, you have 2 WCs for up to 150 males, plus 1 for every additional 200 males or thereof. And 1 urinal for every 50 males up to 200 males, and 1 for every additional 70. So again, when you break it down, if we had 2 urinals and 2 sit-down WCs for gents, that would give us a capacity for gents alone of 150 as a minimum. So using maths, if you halved the number of urinals and halved the number of toilets, you would come to a figure of 75. But we've actually got 2 urinals and 1 sit-down. So we're looking for a figure somewhere between 75 and 150 for males, which leaves us 3 sit-down toilets in excess of that for females at 25 each is another 75, which gives you 150. And I'd be happy with 150. You also take into account that Norfolk Council are basically saying the same type of thing that I'm saying, in that you generally have more males in a pub than you do females, or in a brewing situation. And they have an option, or they have listed that you offer the rule of 75% males and 25% female in this equation, which complicates matters further. And if you base it on other district councils' figures, a figure of 150 with the current number of toilets that we've got is easily achievable and more than enough. If you look at my experiences in that kind of equates to what we've always ran with in the past. In Sheffield, working for various different companies in various different establishments, that's what we seem to have come at. So I cannot fathom how we can go from these figures down to 50 people, which on all literature, British Standard, Norfolk Council, Derbyshire Council, indicates 1 sit-down WC for male, 1 sit-down WC for female equals 50 people. We have got more than double that, plus 2 urinals. So how can we still have the same figure of 50? And on top of that, all of our toilets, with the exclusion of the gents, are designed and built so they are accessible by all denominations of people, no matter what sexual orientation you are. All of our toilets are floor-to-ceiling walls, full-height doors, and lockable. But that also gives us the opportunity to make sure that these spaces are flexible spaces, which we've tried to make our entire building flexible. So if we have an event on which is generated more towards male, for instance, a beer festival, or for instance, a brewery trip, if we have more males than females on site, then they can use the toilets, because all our toilets are unisex toilets. And I just cannot see, no matter which literature I read, and no matter which school of mathematics I use, how can we arrive at a figure of 50 when every district council in the country says 50 is for 2 single WCs, and we have double that plus 2 urinals. And I think if I carry on, I'll be repeating myself, so I'm not going to.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. So I'm going to go to councillors now. Have you got any questions? Yes, Joe.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see a big gap on the toilets issue, but one thing I'm not clear about in Elaine's version of the maths, Elaine, you were saying for a capacity of 150, you would want 5 ladies and some number of gents. I'm just reading off the chart here. Surely 5 ladies and under your scheme gives you a capacity of 150 ladies in the premises, and therefore presumably you know, a total capacity in a place of 300, because you know the number you've given.
Yeah.
In your version of the maths, surely you're working on the basis that they're all ladies, and that's how many ladies they'll mean, or they're all gents, and that's how many gents they'll mean. You've not halved it, so to account the fact that it'll be half gents and half ladies.
Well, you don't half it. The British standard says you assume it is 50% female. We have lots more genders than that.
No, I appreciate that. Sorry, Mark, I appreciate that point. I was asking, his question was to Elaine because I was unclear about how she'd come to her numbers, and I was hoping Elaine could answer that. I appreciate the point about having basically toilets are accessible to everyone without having to, you know, where, I mean, my mum's partner gets challenged sometimes when she goes into the ladies, and it's outrageous, and she's, you know, she's not trans, but she gets challenged anyway because she looks a bit ambiguous. And it's much better, as you say, to have toilets that you can just go in, that you lock, and then nobody's going to challenge you in there because you're the only person in
Absolutely.
there. So I appreciate that. But sorry, my question was on Elaine's version of the maths, that to reach the figure of 5 ladies toilets for your capacity, surely you've not taken account that half the people in there won't be ladies, or have you? I mean, can you explain that? You're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
I don't suppose you've got the little table that I produced in this document.
Yes, I mean, actually, Mark was quoting from the same document at one point, because the stuff where it says 2 for up to 150 males plus 1 for every additional 200 males.
Confusing.
A different amount if there aren't urinals. That's the document you're showing me, isn't it?
Yes.
So you're both referring to the same document at some point, which is progress, isn't it?
It is. It helped. Well, that's why I did it, because toilets are really challenging trying to work it out. We have kinds of some guidance that we give to people when they're applying for a license, and I think at some point it was, you know, this is what was given to me when I started with Sheffield. And there's 2 tables that we work from. One is for provision for restaurants and other places where seating is provided for eating and drinking, and the other is the table for licensed pubs, bars, nightclubs and discos. So there's kind of 2, one's for drinking establishments and one isn't. Now, when you're looking at calculating, so saying you're going to start, well, we'll keep it easy. Let's say it's 100. So we've got 100 people. Now, because you've got to assume a ratio of 50-50, so you would split that 100 into 2 lots of 50. So you've got 50 male and 50 female. Now, normally there's fewer, there's usually, there tends to be fewer toilet facilities for women, because obviously you men, you've got urinals as well. Whereas women, obviously, you've just got the water closet. So you split the total number down into 2. And what I've done on this little table is to try and make it clearer. So, so up to 25 males, you can have 2 WCs if you know urinals, and up to 25 females, 2 toilets, 2 water closets. But then if you're looking at, so for females, up to 25 females, and then you would need 2 water closets, and then 1 for every additional 25 females or part thereof up to 200 females. So what I've done in the table is started off, well, you've got up to 25 females, that's 2 water closets. Up to 50, that's an additional 25. You then go, or part thereof, then you're going up to 3 water closets. Add another 25, and you're going up to 4 water closets. Whereas for the male numbers of male water closets, that stays consistent for quite a long way until you get up to 150. And so that's based on your 50-50 ratio. Does that make any more sense? I mean, one thing that might be just to put out there which might help, if this was a workplace with 160 people, 160 employees, you know, this is just to give you some kind of comparison. If you've got 160 at any one time, you would need 8 WC cubicles, and that's down as an approved code of practice. But that's more to do with employees, but it gives you kind of an idea of the scale of provision for 160. And I've also got some guidance on unisex, but you can't count your unisex twice. Does that help? It's very confusing.
Not really. I mean, I was asking if you applied your half in the correct place, and I'm not clear from your answer whether
I'm confident I've applied that in the correct place.
Okay. Well, look, I'll let others come in at this point. I'm not sure I've had a.
I know Mark's quite passionate on this, and I have asked if he would send me the standard he's working from so I could work it out, but he didn't, unfortunately, because it's quite confusing trying to just do it in this situation. But I'd be happy to look at his guidance that he's got.
Okay, Mark, I'm just going to ask if the councillors have got any questions, just a minute, because it's our chance to just ask questions. Cliff, can you just come in and ask your question?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yes. So, Mark, just a little bit of clarification. You've been doing work on this property. It's been a pub before. Am I correct in saying that?
No, it was the Sheffield City Council Parking Services officers.
Oh, right. Okay.
So the based upon the number of plug points for charging two-way radios for traffic wardens to operate, there was a hell of a lot of people employed in this building.
Right. Okay, that's fine. So we can blame some of it on them. My other question was, when the upstairs is used for events, say for a film or for a play or the like, is there not going to be a time when everybody comes out, say at the interval or at the end, and want to use the toilet all at once? You know, it does strike me that they're going to be inadequate under those circumstances, at least.
No, we're not suggesting that we're going to use it upstairs as a cinema or film. We've licensed the entire area for all licensable activities that we see as suitable to our business. For instance, we could have asked for wrestling to be shown and boxing, right? But we've gone against that because it doesn't fit with what we want to do. So we're not going to be a cinema. We want a flexible space. You know, if COVID has taught us anything, it's taught us that we need to be flexible. We've not brewed beer since February. We brew beer in a cask version to be delivered to pubs to be served on a traditional hand pull. So we are a traditional microbrewery. And we want things that fit in with our ethos and what we are doing. So we've not had a single customer since February because we don't sell cans, we don't sell bottles, we don't sell keg. All the pubs have been shut down. The ones that have reopened, the majority aren't serving cask ale because they don't know what times they're going to be open from until. Cask ale has a very short shelf life when you breach a cask, so they can't risk putting a cask on and not selling it. So we have to diversify, which is why we are building the pub. We've operated pubs in the past quite successfully, but we want a flexible space. We're going to sell food. We're going to sell food to take away. We're going to sell beer to take away at the same price you can buy in an off license. We want a flexible space. So if we have an event on upstairs and it is just a cinema and there is a break where everyone will use the toilets at once, we will look at that on a case-by-case basis and determine how many toilets. And if we need to bring extra toilets in, like Portaloos, we'll bring them in. If we have an event outside, like, say, a beer festival, we will bring toilets in for a beer festival if our figures are going to exceed the capacity of what we need for the building. Now, toilets are very important. You know, Elaine touched upon 160 employees would need X amount of toilets. Now, that is if an employee is sat at their desk all day for 8 hours. Of course, they're going to need the toilet, but we're operating a business which can be transient. You'll have people coming in for a quick pint after work. You'll have people coming in and spending an evening with us and everything in between. So, you know, we need to look at this. We need to get it right. I don't want to be putting a temporary event notice in every week or bringing toilets in every week. But the figures that Elaine is quoting are just madness. You know, to simplify this, to make it really, really simple, if I have one sit-down gents toilet and one sit-down ladies toilet, no urinals, nothing else, what is my capacity?
Are you asking us to answer that, or Elaine?
Elaine, please.
So if you had 2 toilets, one male, one female, what's his capacity, Elaine? And you're on mute, just to remind you.
Well, the standards that we have, that we use, the British standards, there is no equivalent for that small number of toilets. What the guidance that I have here that Sheffield City Council use is for an establishment which is really just for restaurants, is an establishment with up to 25 seats should provide one wheelchair accessible unisex toilet, which may be used by both staff and customers. And that is the closest to what Mark is asking on that question. But that is for restaurants.
So one single unisex toilet, sit-down variety, gives you 25 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
In a restaurant or a cafe. But I think the problem is you're trying to extrapolate.
Okay, so a restaurant or a cafe will serve alcohol, possibly, and food, and have people on the premises with drink.
Yeah, I'll say yes to that.
Okay. So one single sit-down WC is 25 people. So if I have 2, according to North Norfolk Council, according to Derbyshire Dales Council, if I have 1 sit-down WC for gents, 1 sit-down WC for ladies, that gives me 50 people. Am I correct? Am I on the right line?
Are we all agreeing that? Do you agree that, Elaine? Yeah, and you're on mute, Elaine, still.
I think the difficulty is you're trying to cross over guidance and standards and just extrapolate.
I am, but the first point in British.
Can I just finish, please? There are lots of different. The British standard has got guidance for different kinds of environments. We use the one which is specifically for public houses, restaurants, discos, and places which have alcohol. There are different standards if you've got a very small premises. There's a different number that you can apply. There's different recommended numbers if you've got things like cinemas and venues like that, where you've got multiple people coming and leaving at different times. And there's also guidance on unisex toilets, but the standard that we are, you're not a small premises and you're trying to work from extrapolating something that might be suitable in a very small premises. Potentially you've got, well, let's use the figure of 160, for example, for the building. That gives you, there's clear guidance on the numbers of toilets for that many people. If, as I say, I'm happy to look at the numbers that you've got, and trying to work this out, thrash this out in this format isn't really, I don't feel, the most appropriate, because it's not straightforward. But the guidance that I've given you right from the beginning is the one that we consistently try to apply to licensed premises for the ones which are the pubs, bars and nightclub standard, those with A4. We have a slightly different standard we look at for those that are restaurants and cafes.
Okay, so to clarify then, if a premises has one sit-down WC, it's 25 people. Now, I can't see how, if your premises is the side of a football pitch and you've got one sit-down WC, that's 25 people, whether it's as big as a football pitch or as big as a postage stamp. So to clarify something as a small premises or a large premises is a bit ambiguous. And that's not clear in the British Standard. And the British Standard says, unless other data is available. So looking at North Norfolk Council and Derbyshire Dales Council, that's clearly other data. Looking at experience, that's clearly other data. And I've requested that you supply me all the data for other licensed premises in Sheffield. So we can't just keep looking and say, well, it's a large premises. What's large? What's small? It's not large. We'll have 44 seats in the downstairs area approximately. I'm trying to get 50 seats approximately. You know, we are a small premises, in my opinion. But fundamentally, 25 people for one sit-down WC. It's in the British standards. It's in North Norfolk Council. It's in Derbyshire Dales Council. And all we're doing is saying, well, we've got 2 of those, so that's 50. And that's in North Norfolk Council. That's in Derbyshire Dales Council. And the majority of councils around the country, they are all singing from the same sheet. So I may as well take out, according to your maths, I may as well get rid of my gents toilet, which has got 2 urinals and a WC. I may as well get rid of my disabled toilet and just leave 2 WCs, which means it's going to cost me less to clean and less to maintain, and still give me a capacity of 50 of what you're saying. So in order to get to your capacity of 50, I need to remove 2 WCs and 2 urinals. How can you explain that?
Elaine, oh, Cliff, are you wanting to come in?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit concerned about the numbers. We're working with the fire safety officers' numbers, but when you actually look at the ground floor plan, I mean, the fire safety officers come up with a figure of 100 as allowable, but it's going to be pretty crowded with 100. I mean, is that the only figure we have to work with? Can a different figure be specified? Because it does seem a ridiculously large number for the seating that's available. Can I have sort of advice on that, please?
I'm happy with the number of. I'm more than happy with the fire officers' numbers. The fire officers' numbers is based upon the width of the fire exits and how many people we can safely get out of the building at any one time. I'm more than happy with his numbers. More than happy. We could have 50 people sat down in there. You could have another, 20 people stood up on a busy night pre-COVID, and you might have 20 in the beer garden. or in the outside space, which we might use as a beer garden. That gives you 90. So if I was only ever going to have 50 on site, then that's what I'd be looking at. You could also have people coming in for a takeaway. You could also have people coming in who are just browsing in the shop and buying beer to take away. So I'm happy with the fire officer's figures. It's just I just cannot see how we can get to such a small number of toilets when I can remove 2 toilets and 2 urinals and get to 50 by removing toilets.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Elaine, you're on mute.
Can I just make a final point here? The fire officer is given a value which could safely be evacuated. It is not the same as a premises capacity. The capacity considers the fire officer's numbers, whether or not the premises is overcrowded, and that's a certain floor area per person, excluding all your seating and everything. And it also considers the number of toilets. So although the fire officer said that you could safely evacuate 100 from the downstairs, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the capacity. It just means that is the maximum for your fire safety. You know, as you've said yourself, it would be quite crowded in there if you had more than 70 people. So probably 70 is more appropriate for the bar.
I'm getting a little bit confused myself now. I don't know if anybody else is, but I'm hearing numbers of 50, 160, 80, and now 70.
I mean, I'm happy. I understand the difference between the positions of the applicant and the officer. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it's not been, you know, and I think, you know, there's some dispute as to how, you know, the difference between the two as to how the correct number should be calculated. I think I'm clear where they both stand, if that's a useful thing for anybody to
Okay. Okay. Can I just come in and just clarify the other conditions, Mark, with you? So the vehicle movement, you're saying that you're in agreement with what was mentioned about the vehicle movement, and the same with the building controls. Just so that I know we're hung up on the toilets a minute. I just want to see if there's anything else in the background on those. Is there any issues with any of that? I know you mentioned about the building control certificate.
I'm happy with vehicle movement to the last email I replied to regarding vehicle movement. Because after replying to it, I've had subsequent emails which backtrack for me to re-agree something I've already agreed, which I'm not happy with. Vehicle movement basically is if we have to move a vehicle. So if I'm not stood behind the bar serving, right, it'll be my vehicle that's moving. If we have to move a vehicle, we will use banksmen. We will make sure customers are separated. It's not an issue. It's just common sense. We have also, and in terms of building control, I've spoken to building control, private companies and the council, and the council's basic stand on it was how much money you're spending on it. We charge you a percentage of your spend. I'm like, well, that's, for me, that's irrelevant. That shouldn't be a percentage of spend. It should be, does it need do you need building control to remove a suspended ceiling and stud walls? No. Do you need an electrical certificate to reinstall some electrical circuits? Yes. So the majority of the licensing has been agreed in principle. I'd need to look over it just to make sure we've not backtracked on what we've agreed in subsequent emails. The issue is the toilets. So just to make it really simple, you know, and not sort of confuse fire officer figures with capacity figures with, well, what happens if you get so many people here? Basically, toilets, British standard, and all other data available using other local councils is 25 sit down female. A sit down type female is 25. So I will physically have to remove 2 toilets and 2 urinals to get down to Elaine's figure of 50 and be compliant with British standard, which is only a guide. It specifically states in the British standard it is to be used as a guide only. There is no legislation, and if other data is available. So please, can someone explain to me why I've got to remove 2 toilets and 2 urinals to get down to capacity of 50?
Okay. Has anyone else got any questions that they want to ask? Does any of the officers want to ask any questions? Yes,
Yeah.
John?
Could I just ask Elaine to read out the suggested condition about the movement of vehicles, please? Just to make sure we've got it clearly. Thank you.
The conditions that I would like you to consider is that the movement of vehicles and barrels during bar opening hours are to be risk assessed and customers separated from any moving or lifting activities.
Thank you.
And I'm totally in agreement with that.
Right.
That's common sense. We do that anyway. We've already agreed to that in email.
Okay, that's great.
Can I? That's a good tip. That's good. And in terms of the events in the yard, which may involve licensable activities, I suggested a risk assessment should be undertaken for events involving licensable activities and or regulated entertainment taking place in the yard, identified on the plan and submitted to the Health Protection Service where attendees exceed the premises agreed capacity. So that's if that was another one that I asked Mark to consider.
Mark, what is your response?
Well, my response is, if I wanted to apply for a temporary events notice every time I did an event, I wouldn't have applied for this license. What I want to do is have some agreements in principle, which means I can operate a business and earn a shilling without having to fill forms in every time I want to do something. But in response to that specific one, I will not be putting any events on in the yard which exceeds my capacity.
And I presume you'd be doing a risk assessment each time you put on an event.
Yeah, if we do, for instance, if we did a beer festival and it was our summer beer festival, we would risk assess the summer beer festival and do it. We wouldn't necessarily risk assess the summer beer festival the following year. We'd do a copy and paste of the risk assessment. We'd evaluate it and say, well, what was successful? What wasn't successful? Where can we improve? And that's just, for me, that is just ongoing common sense.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
Sorry, can I have a clarification of this proposed condition? Because it said we want you to refer back to the health protection team in cases where the event is going to exceed the venue capacity. Is that right? So if it doesn't exceed the venue capacity, you don't need to hear from Mark. Is that what you're asking?
That it was if the yard was being used that exceeds the capacity of the premises, where the capacity we're talking about is what is, it includes things like the toilets.
So yeah, what capacity are we talking about? What's the number we're talking about?
Well, that was the problem. We haven't agreed it.
Right. And do we need to agree that in order to grant this license? Is that?
I think it would be sensible to decide a number on what the capacity should be. We've got some indication from the fire officer as to what it should not exceed. But we have to consider the number of toilets and the sort of the
Okay, so I'm perhaps clear on the condition, but suddenly unclear on something else. Yeah, I mean, sorry, can I have some advice from Marie Claire? Should we have a number on this license? You're muted. You're still muted.
Yeah, sorry, I usually.
Oh, you keep going.
There you go.
Yeah, there needs to be a capacity on it, but it's the sort of experts involved are the people who need to be determining the number rather than you as members of the committee would be what I'd say to you.
Yes, I'm a bit unclear why it's not clear what the number we're talking about is.
I mean, I don't actually know what the normal process for determining capacity is. Claire, do you? That's not something that we would normally consider, you see. It would come to us and say the capacity is X, and you'd work from that.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the applicant would discuss the capacity separately with the fire officer and the health protection team, and agree that in principle, usually going with the lower of the two amounts. It isn't written anywhere on the license capacity. It's based on different legislation.
So, okay, so the fire officer has said 160, is that number 160 come from the fire officer as regards the interior upstairs and downstairs?
Yeah.
So health protection presumably could have said at some point, given that you've installed 4 toilets, we think your capacity toilet wise is X. What would that, if you did, what would that X be?
So we're saying 160, but just
160 is the fire number, but then if
fire,
there's a toilets number as well, what is the number you would think would be appropriate capacity given the provision of toilets, Elaine?
that is the 50.
50.
That is what we would recommend. It's in that area.
Right. I mean, and it's not normally the way this committee works. That I think that we then go away into session and decide what we think the number is, because that's never how I don't think we're qualified. I'm not satisfied that the application that's come to us has come to us with enough work in it for us to make a decision. I think this is the problem that I now feel I'm facing.
Yeah, I feel like we've been asked to make a decision and we haven't got the expertise or the we need the numbers and then we make a decision from the experts.
Okay, but let's suppose the thing had come to us and Mr. Simonite is entitled to come to the subcommittee, isn't he, to dispute an objection. And if he says he thinks his capacity is 100 and he wants a license for 100 or 150 or whatever it is, and health protection says no, it's only 50, he is entitled to come to us and say, I think you should give me this license anyway. So maybe that is what is happening. If that is what is happening, then we can consider it, can't we? Anybody?
Marie Claire?
You're muted.
No, for whatever reason, it's not letting me unmute. I think we've got an application before us and you need to determine it.
So have we got an agreement on the 160 and everybody agrees? Mr. Simonite and Elaine, everybody agrees that from the fire service?
I don't think
what we're saying?
I think we all agree that that's what the fire service have said. I don't think health protection then agree with that as a capacity number. Health protection service is saying the more appropriate number is 50, and therein lies the dispute.
So I suppose I'm not clear really then what our options are. I mean, if Mr. Simonite is saying he wants a capacity of 160, we could agree with him in principle, or we could agree with health protection and say it's 50. Presumably we could pick a number in between. I don't know if that's legally proper or not. Or is it, or should we not be talking about numbers? But if we don't talk about numbers, is there any other way of resolving this application?
Well, as with all things, everything, you've got to determine it all on the merits of what's in front of you.
Well, yes, but the license. I mean, I suppose the question goes back to my first question. The license have a number. If we make a decision to approve this license, is there a capacity number implicit in that approval anywhere? Because it doesn't say so on papers unless I've missed it.
Yeah, there is a capacity. That capacity goes on the license, doesn't it, Claire?
Not usually. No, we wouldn't specify a capacity. It can be written into the conditions, but there isn't a specific area where we'd put a capacity on the license.
Oh, okay.
Right. Okay. So we could. So one option would open to us would be to add a condition so that we're satisfied that the toilet provision is adequate. Add a condition limiting the that would be one of the options open to us, I suppose, in that case. Go on. Sorry, I'm not chairing, but I see Mark's got his hand up.
No, I appreciate you trying to clarify, Joe. Thank you.
So to add more confusion then, it's normal practice not to put a capacity on a license. So why am I being singled out for a capacity of 50, which means to achieve that, I have to remove 2 urinals and 2 toilets?
I understand the point you're making, Mr. Simonite, but I don't think that's quite what we're talking about.
No.
I appreciate the point. It does seem an unsatisfactory process, but I think it's the nature of the dispute between the applicant and the health protection is that we are talking about the capacity number. Mr. Simonite, can I ask you what capacity you're asking for? What you think the correct capacity is?
If I was allowed to use my toilet in the brewery, which I'll be using for brewery tours, then I would want a capacity looking at 1, 2, 3, about 160, 170, something like that. Looking at using just the toilets on site here for just the normal day-to-day operating, I'd expect 150 without blinking, without even thinking we're going to get queuing, without thinking it's going to cause an issue. I'd expect 150 with the number of toilets I've got, the experience I've got, the other data available from other local councils, trying to look at the British standard and decipher where we fit. I would say 150 is absolutely achievable on what we've got.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think that's enough questions for me.
Right. Thank you, Joe. Cliff?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just to clarify, we can go ahead with the determination on the basis of 150 to 160 as the maximum. Is that right?
Anybody?
Are we in agreement with that?
Well, I think you can go ahead on the basis that you don't need to be determining capacities.
We need to know the capacity to determine the toilet provision, that's all. So we need to determine it on the basis of the number of people likely to be there.
You need to determine determine whether or not the application will undermine the licensing objectives.
Can I add? I'm more than happy if I have an event in the yard, for instance, a beer festival. I'm more than happy to bring in portable toilets for the event. But on a day-to-day running of this premises, as it stands, I'm happy with 150.
Can I just ask then, if you were going to bring toilets in, sorry, I hope this doesn't muddy it all up now, but if you were going to bring toilets in, on what capacity or what numbers would you determine you needed extra toilets?
Just because, in my opinion, when I go to events, where no matter what it is, I always think the toilets are quite substandard. And that's not what we do. You know, you look at the events that we've done in the past, and we far exceed capacities of a British standard for outside events. Always have done. You know, we're not. It's not an events-based business. It's a brewery-based business. It's just what's personal to me. You know, I know for a fact if we did have 200 people at a beer festival, plus you've got the pub open, I know for a fact the toilets would struggle. So I'd just bring in more toilets. Just the same as if I knew I was going to be busy, I'd put more bar staff on a Friday night.
Okay.
Chair,
Joe,
are we up to closing remarks now? I've lost track of where we're up to. I think we've had questions on the report, questions on the case anyway.
Well, if everybody's asked the questions, has anybody else got any more questions?
Can I just say, if any of you want to come down to the premises individually, socially distanced, etc., we'll have a walk round. I'll show you and explain to you exactly where we're coming from, and you'll appreciate what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
You're more than welcome to visit site.
Thank you, Mr. Simonite. Can I just ask now, you have got one final opportunity to sum up and say anything final that you want to say. Oh, sorry, that's Elaine. No, Mr. Simonite, you've got the opportunity, sorry, to, because you're the applicant, to say anything final that you want to say that you haven't already said.
Well, yeah, I just think in my kind of 37 years of operating in this arena, around the world, across Europe, up and down the country, and looking at the information that is available to me from various different local councils and British Standard, I'm on the right lines. And we've gone over this. You know, you're fed up of hearing me talk now.
Okay, thank you very much. So now it's over to Claire. Can you read us out our options, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the options open to the committee this afternoon are to grant the premises licence in the terms requested, to grant the premises licence with conditions, or to reject the whole or part of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to go into private session and make our decisions. So, Kay, thank you, Mr. Simonite, for joining us today. Same with you, Elaine. Thank you for coming today. Kay, can you take Claire, Mark and Elaine out of the meeting, please?